Welcome everybody in to another Nice Job live chat. As always, presented by Engage. It's real-time social proof for your website, and you get it absolutely free. So if you don't want social proof and you want to pay for things, Engage isn't for you. But if you want more leads and sales, I have a feeling it's right up your alley. Really excited about our topic today: overcoming fear in business. There's a lot of words in there that can seem buzzwordy. The topic itself might seem like it's just something you've heard over and over and over. But my guest today has a great personal perspective on it, but also, in my personal opinion, has the resume to back up the knowledge that he's going to share today. I would say lifelong entrepreneur would be a good title for him, but business growth strategist is what you might know him by. It is Tim Croll. Tim, thank you so much for joining us here on the Nice Job Podcast.
What?
Right?
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. I always get super excited. And then today, of all days, you asked me to come in, and I'm so thankful you did. It was one of the longer days, and I'm coming down towards the end of my day, so I need that energy from you, and I appreciate the intro, man. I just love it. So.
Well, I try to be as energetic as possible, and regular listeners of the podcast will tell you that I will always be like, I'm excited about this topic. But this one in particular, as I alluded to, is especially interesting to me because there's a lot of advice you might see out there that is very high level and so basic that it's no different than if you were just in a store that sold motivational posters and you try to just put it in complete sentences. But I've read some articles with you. I've heard you on some other podcasts, and I love the perspective that you bring on it because there is a personal tie-in. But you also give like, all right, here's action plan. Here's something you can do to really start accomplish it. So let's just start with you, Tim, from the beginning. If you want to give us kind of a short background just on you. I talked about, your resume and kind of your backstory and the experience that you have. You don't have to go through line by line, but tell us, if they've never heard of Tim Croll, who Tim Croll is.
Oh, well, that's interesting. And I've really come to understand what I dreamed of as a kid. I always wanted to be a cowboy. I always wanted to be the adventurous. I always wanted to be going and looking. And I just couldn't come to grips with the way society was talking and saying, hey, you've got to follow this path. You got to have this job. You got to go to this work, and then you fulfill your lifelong work time, and you get out. And then I'm just like, that is so not me. And so what you said about a lifelong entrepreneur, that resonates with me. I started out with baseball cards. I was selling stuff, bidding stuff out in high school. I did paper routes. I made Christmas trees and walked around the neighborhood and sold those. I did all kinds of things just as a kind of a way to be able to make money, experience some of the adventure of what was going on. Transitioning into that, I ended up owning my own business, went completely belly up. I didn't go bankrupt, but pretty doggone close. I lost 2 houses, lost cars, lost vehicles because I didn't know how to manage some things, and I was still learning. Shoot, I was a 22-year-old punk that had a lot of ego, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that kind of resonate with that. So I did mess up. And then I went back and I'm like, okay, well, if that's all messed up, then I'm going to get a job. So I did that, worked in corporate world for a little while. And I realized that really, truly was not for me. Then I jumped back in and I did some profit sharing ventures. That's where some of the e-com came from. Built out a couple of companies, a couple $1 million or so a month in gross revenue sales. And I absolutely loved it. But through all of that, and this is the core of my life, and this is what's going to tie in all about the fear, I made a commitment to myself that I was not going to live in a spirit of fear. I was not going to allow fear to stop me from doing things. And whether that was in my businesses or whether it was in something that an adventure in life or whatever that was, I was not going to allow fear to stop me from moving forward and from taking action. And that's been, like I said, it's been a core value. It's been a lifelong endeavor. And to be honest, sometimes I still experience the fear. So it's just because I say I'm not going to let it stop me doesn't mean I don't feel it.
And I think it's a good time to almost define, would you consider yourself fearless, or
No.
you now have the capability to overcome fear?
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever goes fearless because you're always going to experience that emotion. And, I've done some pretty crazy things in my life. Some things that almost got me killed. I fought for my life in a matter of what I felt was hours, is only about 2 or 3 seconds. And so the whole point that I have on that is when you start defining fear and saying that somebody is fearless, it gives that connotation that they don't ever experience those emotions. they don't ever have or embrace the what ifs. What if this doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if they don't, they still have those emotions, right? So it's not that they're completely fearless. It's the choices that they're making to be able to act through that fear. And so if it's okay, let me define the two, because I think this is really important. So if we look at fear, fear is, it's an unpleasant emotion that's caused by a belief that something or someone or some action is going to either possibly be dangerous, it's going to cause harm, it's going to be something that's a threat, it's something that could cause permanent injury, things like that. So the fear is that belief that something is not right or something's going to be painful. Okay. So that's the emotion part of that. And that's what happens inside of us. And again, so if we relate that to whether it's your personal life, your business, or whatever, those are emotions. So to say that you're going to be fearless is to take all of those emotions. And this is what I really don't like about our American culture. Actually, I should call it the Western culture, is the fact that we as men and business owners are taught to take all of that fear, all of that emotion, put it in a little tiny box here and go ahead and set it over on the side. And then we don't really know how to deal with it. And we don't know how to make decisions. And that causes us to not act, causes us to not make decisions in our business. It causes us to start hindering and stopping our employees from embracing what they can be. They lose self-confidence. They lose their confidence. We lose our self-confidence. And all of these things start to domino effect because we took our fear, our emotions, put them in a little box over on the side and chose to ignore it.
Do you think that anxiety is a predecessor to fear or is a result of fear? Because there's some people that say, you know what, I don't know if there's things I'm like fearful of, but I get this paralyzing anxiety where I'm just not sure. And so I thought you'd be a good person to ask this of like, if you're starting to feel anxious, is that a sign of, hey, like I self-identify, go, it's not a fear yet. Don't let it become a fear. Or it's, hey, the reason that you're probably having anxiety is because you have this belief that this thing is scarier than it is.
Well, it's kind of a chicken egg kind of a thing.
Yeah.
What came first? Was it the chicken or the egg? I mean, you need both to be able to get started. And I think that's kind of very similar to what you're asking. And so I don't know that I could definitely define and say dogmatically anxiety predicates fear. I don't think that you can say fear comes before anxiety. I don't think that you could actually define it that way because it's definitely an emotion. It's definitely something that's going on. Something that, and this might be a little bit of a rabbit hole, but something that I can say, that feeling that you have, let's just call it the anxiety feeling that you have, that emotion is the exact same emotion that you feel when you get excited about something. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I get up on stage, those feelings that I have, I always have a little bit of nerves every time I go out and I do a public speaking or getting up there. And I have the choice right then and there to decide, is that because I'm scared and I don't know if these people are going to like me? And that's all of that false belief that has been created. Or am I excited to be able to get out and share my story, to leave an impact, to change somebody's life? I'm actually getting goosebumps right now because I can picture myself in that situation and I feel that stuff. I feel those anxieties. I think that, and then I make that conscious effort to change and say, okay, well, it's not because I'm afraid to be up there. That's not the case. The reason why I'm feeling this right now is because I'm really getting excited to be up there. Now, the first couple of seconds that I'm up there, 1 minute, 2 minute, kind of like, yeah, and then all of a sudden I feel the energy and it clicks and everything's just starting to flow. And then, I mean, there's a lot of lessons and things on speaking that we're not going to go into. But the point is I have a plan and then I execute on that plan and then I adapt when I have to. And so I have this process. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I have this process that I work through and understanding that fear, again, it's that belief that something's going to be dangerous or that it's going to be threatening. I have to look at that and say, okay, well, if that is the case and I have this belief and I have a feeling, then what is it that I have to do to be able to overcome all of that? And what do I have to do to be able to work through that? And I teach this to my kids. I teach it to those that I work with. I teach this thing all the time. And the results that come out of this are the fact that you gain your self-confidence. You become stronger as an individual. You become more sure of yourself. And it gives you a path forward that in spite of circumstances, and I'll label this as far as we frankly have no idea what our future holds. We have no idea. Beginning 2020, we had no idea COVID was going to show up. We had no idea shutdowns were going to happen, right? We had no idea about that. So we can only plan for as much certainty as what we can plan for. The other stuff, we have a little bit of faith, a little bit of trust in the fact that God's got this. and it's out of our control, right? It's things that we can't even deal with. So again, that's a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but the point is, and we can either lay out, and I mean, I love the conversational aspect of this, but I can give you the 4 points, or we can go and define fear a little bit more. You tell me the direction that you'd like to go, and we'll get some feedback from the audience too, probably.
Yeah, and I definitely, so it's kind of a little bit of both. We'll go towards kind of I know you have like an action plan of how you kind of overcome fear. And I know at the very beginning of that is kind of like identifying, the fear and figuring that out. So as we dive into that, I almost want to, tee up that sort of, part of the action plan is, from what I gather, if you're embracing the fact that there's nothing out there that like is, you can completely overcome. You talk about like you were close to bankruptcy, you lost houses. It wasn't like you were succeeding through that, but it didn't stop your ultimate journey. That was kind of thing. So there's not an invincibility, but there needs to be a confidence that if you approach it the right way, the outcome is going to be what the outcome should be. So if you try to overcome, but it results in failure, it's not that the process might not have worked, but you might just not have been in that situation to succeed. So once you embrace it and you got to identify it, let's start there when it comes to an action plan to overcoming fear.
Yeah, because I think that's the biggest key. So let me just take a half a step backwards, because like I said at the beginning of the fact, it is a choice to act. So it's a foundational principle. And we'll get into these 4 things, but it's a foundational principle, because here's the one thing that I have come to understand about fear. The more that we give into it, the bigger that it gets. And the easiest way for me to explain this is I love hiking, and I took a trip down Icebox Canyon out at Red Rock. It's right outside of Las Vegas. Love the place. It's absolutely beautiful. If you get a chance, go. We took that Icebox Canyon, went all the way to the back, and there's this waterfall that's up a little bit of I say it's a steep incline. It's not even really a cliff. It could feel like a cliff, but it's just a steep incline, probably around 10, 15 feet up. And so you have to get down on your hands, and you kind of walk up this like a crab crawl kind of a thing, and you get up to the top and you see the beautiful waterfall. It's really, really cool. Well, that was going. I was acting. Turned around to start coming back, and I looked down, and I'm like, wow, this is at least 20 feet up. Oh, wait. And then the longer that I stood there, the higher it got. And then by the time I was done standing there, I'm looking at it like, this is at least 50 feet up. And I'm looking at this, and it kept growing. Because as I stood there, the longer that I stood there, the bigger, the higher that seemed to me. And so it's a really important lesson, as you understand, the more that you give into it, the more you pay attention to that fear, the larger it's going to grow. It's going to take up as much space in your life, in your heart, and in your home, in your business, as you give it. So the first understanding is that you have to be able to look at that and say, I know that this is going to grow if I don't deal with it. And the only way to deal with it is to decide to act and to do something about that, right? So mastering fear is really the determination to act in spite of that feeling of anxiety, or that belief of threat, or that belief of danger. It's that determination to continue to act and to move forward, all right? And so we look at life, my goodness, there's so many things of, well, what if I hire this employee and they rob from me? What if I start a business and it fails? What if I lose money on this customer? What if my truck breaks down? And on and on and on and on about all of these what ifs. That right there is the beginning of the fear. So it's not necessarily the anxiety. It is tied into anxiety, but it's that questioning of what if it goes wrong. Because people will focus and they'll understand and they'll start thinking about that. And if you allow yourself to focus on all of those what ifs, they continue to grow, and they will take up as much space as you allow it. That's the core principle.
Yeah, I like that perspective. Obviously the hiking, imagery there. But there is that uncertainty as you're kind of identifying something, but it's almost like a human nature at times to kind of start to let it build. And so identifying of like, hey, like I'm high up. Let's not worry about how high it is yet. I'm high up, and I need to either like create a plan to get somewhere safe or create a plan to get back down. That's obviously, once you're kind of identifying that's the next stop you want to go.
Correct.
Is finding some action there.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead. You can elaborate on that.
Because as you kind of go down this road, and this is how I've approached, and the feeling of fear happens in our physical life. And then I take that and I apply it, because it also applies to our family lives. It applies to our business life. The way that you deal with it is going to be identical. Doesn't matter what situation it is, doesn't matter how you're into that. It's going to be the exact same identical thing. So for me, one of my situations, we ended up taking a kayaking trip right after our really long winters up here in Michigan. They're super long. And so we were taking a kayaking trip, and we had all planned out, had everything working. And as I stood on the bank of the Sturgeon River, I looked out there and the water was moving faster. The water was a lot higher than what I was expecting. And it was a bright, sunshiny day. And little did I know, in about 2-3 hours, I was going to be fighting for my life. And I'll get into more to that story because that's part of it. But the whole point of the fact is I'm standing on the bank of the Sturgeon River. I started feeling that anxiety start to build. I started thinking about the what ifs. And then my son was with me and a couple of other kids were with me and all these things. And you start thinking about all these what ifs. So what I had to do, and this leads to our very, very first point, is the fact that I had to identify what specifically is making me afraid. Because what we tend to do is when we start in with all of these what ifs, we add and add and add and add, and then they all borrow weight from each other, making them seem like they're that much bigger. Because if I'm only concerned about one little thing, but yet I'm adding and adding and adding, that one little thing takes on all of the mass of all of these other fears and all of these other what ifs. So if I can break that down and say, okay, what specifically is making me nervous? And I identify that. So for me, looking at the banks of the water, I'm saying, okay, this water's a little bit higher. Did you prepare for that? Yeah, we did. We definitely prepared for that. Is it the fact that I'm just a little bit concerned about how fast the water's going? Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about that. But you know what? We've got our life jackets. I'm prepared. So I had to identify that thing that was making me afraid. And I had to take that thing, break down all of the pieces and understand this is what is causing me to be hesitant to act. And it's the same thing in your business, same thing with your employees. What is that thing that's causing you to hesitate to act? And when you identify that, now we can start working on what that one thing is or what those two things are. So that's the first step that you have to do. And again, this applies to any part of your life. You've got to identify what is the thing that's causing that hesitation. What is the thing that's causing you to not want to move forward or not want to act? And that's a big, big key. And that's what most people skip when they're talking about, well, you just need to do it, or you just need to have courage. Well, great, I have courage. Now what? I mean, like, what do I got to do? And so the very first thing, like you said, is to be able to identify what is that thing that's making you afraid.
And then, so you got to identify, you got to create a plan. When creating a plan, sometimes I hear some people say like, well, that's actually where I feel the most pressure when it comes to overcoming my fear, because now it's like, okay, I know I want to overcome this, but I'm not sure what one of my 3 options or something. Like, it's almost, there's so many plans that come to mind that they get this little paralyzation of what to do. So is there any steps in like creating a good plan, or is it like create a plan and then quickly get to trying to use it and adapt? Like, how in this stage, I feel like it can be for some business owners, its own little fear. So in creating a plan, is it, hey, the fear shouldn't be there, or maybe you need to re-identify the fear if you can't make a plan you're confident about? What are some of the hangups when it comes to creating a good plan?
So I think the number one hangup in creating the plan is where you're getting your information. Because we've identified, you identify the fear, you identify the anxiety. Why do you not want to start a business? Why do you not want to continue to grow your business? Why do you not want to hire the employee? We identify that. And then the first step in creating a plan is you go out there and you start gathering information. And you're doing that because you don't really know, I'm going to start a business, but I don't really know what I'm going to do. I don't really know what industry. I don't know what service. I don't know what product. You don't know. And so that part is, okay, I need to go out and do a little bit of research or analytics or things like that. And the number one challenge that we have right now in this world is the fact that we have so much information and we only have a limited amount of attention. So we have a plethora of information. I mean, you can go anywhere, find anything about anything on anywhere, but we only have this much attention. We only have this much capacity to be able to retain that information. So the very first thing, as far as in creating a plan, is you need to be very careful in choosing where you go to get information. So if I'm going to relate that to our water story, what I'm looking at is, okay, I want to look at the DNR site because I want to look at how high the water volumes are. I want to know how much the water is pumping out, so I know how fast it's going. Are we at high records? Are we at low records? Did the raft go down to clear everything? Or like what all the things that are going on for this journey that we're going to take? And that's the same thing that you're looking at. And this is why I highly, let me just take a pause, a brief little rabbit hole in this. You need to have somebody that's going to help you guide that. So whether you call them a coach, you call them a mentor, you call them a consultant, you need to have somebody that's already said, hey, I've been down this river 3 or 4 times. I know what's going to happen. Here's what you need to be able to be equipped and ready to be able to take this journey. So a coach is invaluable. And if anything, I would say, make sure you use that type of a thing. And it has to be somebody that you resonate. So number one is be careful where you're grabbing the information, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Shoot, we're running into our politics, and everybody knows there's misinformation going on, right? Yeah. That's all I'm going to say about politics. But you can see too that there's a definite passion, and there's people that are giving information maybe in a good way, but it's misinformation. It's not going down the right road. So be very, very careful on where you get that information. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is when you look at the plan, you want to be as certain and create as much stability as you can, given the fact that we know circumstances in life is going to change. There's things that you cannot even plan for. You can't plan for a sickness. You can't plan for a death. You can't plan for a lockdown where you can no longer run your business. Those are things you cannot plan for. So you plan for what you can plan for, and then you just leave the rest out there. The biggest challenge, and this is what I see a lot of times, especially in businesses, is they want to make it so perfect that they never get started. And by doing that, you never, ever get a version completed or version started. So listen to this. And this is a comment that I picked up from a good friend of mine. You want to have a version done, not a version none.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, if you're trying to go for perfection and you create a plan for perfection, you'll never get it done. And that will end you up with a version none. So I know it's a little bit of play on words, but hopefully you can remember that, because you're looking for a version done, not a version none.
Yeah, and that really resonates as someone, I would say, with something kind of overcome, is trying to make sure to not fall into a perfectionist sort of realm. Because if you're not implementing, you're not doing something. We talk about the 4 steps, and not to cart before the horse here, but it's once you're implementing, that's when you're getting new data and finding out. So in the river situation, if you're moving a body part, you're making it, and you start doing, you're going to get more information of like, hey, that's going to cause more water to come, or that's going to, like, it gets to that. So You're now like, you're going to start rolling your plan out. And I guess I went a little too much cart for the horse there, but it's really in this stage here. It's really in this stage here implementing where, do you think at this stage is where you want to make sure to also not so much confidence check, but be mindful that you are implementing this plan to find data? Like, this isn't a try one solution. Correct? Yeah.
That's 100% correct. Think of it as a process and a journey, not this is the only way to have it happen, because you have to be able to learn all of the other things that are coming in. So we're talking about identifying the fear, right? And there's going to be some uncertainty. There's going to be some things that are going on, but we identify what's making us stop from moving forward. We create a plan with all of the information that we have, being careful to choose the right information sources. Everything that we gather, there's a certain amount that we can just say, okay, I have got enough. And you have to be comfortable with a little bit of unknown. You have to be comfortable with a little bit of uncertainty. Lou Holtz said this about coaching. A coach's job is to make the player feel uncomfortable, because it's only in the uncomfortable section and the uncomfortable parts of life that we grow and we become stronger. And he did that plan throughout all of his college career, coaching college football. He did that over and over and over again to make his player better people. If we can apply that to ourselves and understand there's a certain matter of you have to be okay with being uncomfortable. You have to be okay with living outside your comfort zone. And that's part of taking that step. That's part of identifying it, putting that plan together, and then now moving into the implementation part of it. You have to be able to implement, because again, it comes back to the action. So you take the first step, you do the second thing, you do the third thing. If I didn't get my butt in the kayak, then I'm never going to move forward. And here's one thing, and I'll share this because this is a really key element when it comes to action. If you don't act, what are you missing out on? What are all of the incredible opportunities that you'll never have, that you'll never see? What are all of those things that you're missing out because you decided to stay in your comfort zone? Yeah. For me, that freaks me out. Because and that's why it comes back to my core value. And one of the things is I choose never to allow fear to stop me. Because if I decided, going back to the hike in the Icebox Canyon, if I decided, I looked at that steep incline and said, no, I don't need to go up there, then I miss out on that beautiful waterfall. Yeah. If I go and don't get my butt into the kayak, then I miss out on that incredible journey. I miss out on seeing the beauty of everything that's going on. It's just so incredible. So if I choose to live inside of my comfort zone all the time, then I miss out on all those opportunities. Translate that into business. If you choose to stay small, that's fine. But if you choose to stay there and not grow your personal and your life, what opportunities are you not able to provide for your family? What opportunities are you not be able to provide for your kids? What other opportunities are you not able to provide for your community to leave the impact on the community? And then obviously leaving an impact on the world, because we ripple out, and the people that we affect only happen because we decided to take that first step.
And that's some strong stuff there, Tim. We get to not to move too far ahead, but adapting to the plan. We talk about kind of getting through it. I want to talk in this part of the journey about adapting to the plan. Is I think this might be the most intuitive for people of, okay, like we're seeing if it works. But is there any insight you can give to the people out there where that's another anxiety form of, like, I feel like I pull the plug too quickly, or I feel like I stay in too long? Is this kind of in a good way a cyclical sort of thing of like, well, look at the data, like think about what plan of action you might kind of take with it, and then decide pro con from there? Obviously every situation is different, but I wonder if you could get us in the mindset of really, like, when you talk about adapting to the plan, is some people think like adapting means change has to happen. And other people says adapting is, well, don't disrupt, but make small tinkers. Since every situation is different, what is a high level way of looking of, hey, at this stage, these are at least things that you want to have proper mindset wise to know that you are making the right decisions when it comes to adapting?
So how much time do we have?
As much as you need. If you're listening on the audio only and it starts going double speed, we might have ran a little long. But no, I want the information to get out there. And Tim, the way I know that you're bringing our audience in right now, I think they'll hang with you for as long as they need to.
Yeah. So when we're looking at the adapting, there's a very key element, and it's a foundational kind of an element here, because let me just reiterate what you said and what I'm hearing, and I think we're on the same path here. But number one is there's a situation where people pull out and they stop enacting the plan too early. And if they would have had a little bit more perseverance, a little bit more drive, a little bit more of just go around the next corner, they would have seen the success. Then they also have, on the other hand, we've got people that like, no, I'm going to do this until I die. It's going to happen until they die. And there's a couple of different elements, and depending on which situation, you have to be able to be enough self-aware to know which one you're in. And again, that comes back to having a coach. But let me take a step back further from that, because I think there's a bigger principle in this. And it starts with the fact of, what is your guiding star? Simon Sinek wrote, what is your why? Other people call it your purpose. Tie all of that stuff together, because here's the thing that's going to give you the ability to make the decision. Are you in the camp where you need to keep moving forward, or are you in the camp where you need to adapt and change and basically pull out completely? And it all comes down to that purpose. So we've talked a lot about all of these things, and I'm going real deep, because this is a foundational principle and foundational key, is you need to know your purpose. And then as you build your purpose, you build your vision, your mission, and then your core values. And let me just give a real quick synopsis. The purpose becomes that North Star. It's not something that you fill. It's not an objective. It's not something that you just like, oh, yep, I got it, so I'm done with my purpose. I can go live my life how. No. That's not how purpose works. Purpose is something that you are going to work towards your entire life. So when I look at it, my purpose is I want to leave an impact on all of those lives that I touch, all those people that I communicate. That's my purpose. And I've embraced that. That's what I feel like my calling is. Does that mean that I'll ever end? No, that just means that all the time that I'm talking, I look at the guide. That's the reason why I do podcasts, because it gives me the chance to work towards my purpose. And that purpose now becomes my guiding star. So picture yourself on a ship. You're the captain of the ship. You look up, and that purpose, that guiding star, is the way you find your direction. Then you step into the vision. Now, people define this all different ways, but let me do it as far as simply this. The vision is what it's going to look like at the end of a specific amount of time. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. That vision is you're painting a picture of what your life is going to look like in that set amount of time. That now gives you a more defined goal, timelines, and things like that. And you want to define that vision. Number 2 on that is your mission. So you're on the boat. You have your guiding star, you have the North Star, so you know your direction. You know that you're going to go to America, you're leaving Europe, and you're going to start going that way because it's going to take a year to get to the United States or to the Americanas or whatever they want to call it. So you have your vision. The mission is now how you are going to achieve that. In other words, how are you going to be able to get the sail set right? How are you going to take advantage of the weather? Are you going to look at the wind coming the right way? Are you, hey, there's a storm down south, so we need to move a little bit farther north to get around so we're not going to crash and burn? All of those things are going to be there. And then the last one is your core values. What is something that is totally you're unable to compromise that part of it? And core values, if I'm using this illustration of the ship, the core values are, how are you going to swab the deck? How are the people going to, how are your shipmates going to stay in line? What are the things that you are unwilling to compromise? That's the direction. That's the basis off of which you make your decision. So now as we're coming down and you look at this option of, hey, I need to stay to it a little bit longer, or I need to pull out. See, what we often look at is we're driving the ship and we're trying to get to the Americans, but all of a sudden we start hearing the song of the siren coming off on the side. And it sounds like it's an opportunity. It sounds like it's going to be really good. But unless we know what our North Star is and the direction that we're going, that purpose, and unless we know exactly what the vision of that future is going to look like, and here's our mission, and here's our core values, unless we know that, your ship is going to be chasing every siren song, crashing into every rock all along the way. So this foundational principle, like you're saying, okay, we're defining the two components, right? We're looking at that as far as adaptability and how to change with the environment. You must first have this purpose, vision, mission, and core value solidified in your life. That translates into your business. That gives you the ability to know when to make the decision to pull back, or when to make this decision, I'm going to stay strong and I'm going to persevere through because I know I'm fulfilling my purpose. I know that I'm going to hit my vision. Regardless of the song of the siren, I am going to push forward because I know that I can do this.
And I know there might be some listeners out there, because when I made a career change, we've talked about a bunch on the podcast prior, but you know, when I came into wanting to grow a community through our NiceJob users, wanting to help the small business community kind of at large, I would always hear similar sort of themes as kind of what you just mentioned there, Tim. And at first I'm like, oh, it seems like everything kind of just reverts back. And well, eventually it kind of triggered my head of like, well, yeah, because like it's the important cores. You know, I grew up, you know, being a hockey player, became a hockey coach, things like that. And it all comes down to skating. You want to know why? Because if you're not skating, nothing, it doesn't, everything else is not coming together. And so it's funny that, or not funny, but I know some people sometimes when they hear about like, it's about culture, it's about purpose, it's about why, sometimes, especially now, like there might be a little eye roll, but it comes, or a little eye roll to it, but it comes to, that will guide everything, because it's that core belief. And the ones that not the billionaires, but the successful entrepreneurs, that people that have, you know, success every day purpose, or at the very least in their mind, in their world, they have a little success that makes what they're doing worth it every day. That's the common thread, is that they have this least identification property where they can tell where they want to go. And there's some that follow a siren song every now and then, but get back. And you can tell, you know, that's hiccups in the road. People that have failure in their story, it doesn't truly define them. You know, we're a reputation marketing company, reputation marketing, you know, podcast, things like that. When we talk about reputation, is reputation as much as it's what you are, it's what other people see of you. Mm-hmm. And it brings me to kind of where I want to touch on before we kind of start wrapping up a bit here is, if you start overcoming fear, you kind of prove it within yourself, you're then in a great position to start expanding that to your team. And I want to get, because I know you have great insight on You talk about coach, talk about mentors, but just small scaling it even more from there.
Mm.
You're the leader of your business. How do you take this, the overcoming fear characteristic, or just the approaching of knowing that, hey, we're, the buffalo and the cow and all that sort of thing. Like
running into it with the buffalo. Yep.
Yeah. What is your, of course, high level, because I feel like I got to preface it, Tim. You and I could talk all day because I love how deep you go with it.
I was just thinking again, how much time do you got?
I love this again, but let's talk about, like, okay, how do you pass on the courage and the overcoming skills to your team members, or at least the right team members, to build that system that becomes part of your reputation and part of your culture?
Yeah. So before I jump into that, let me just kind of conclude the adapting part of it, because I really believe this with 100% of my heart. Adapting to the changing environment is not because you feel like you need to adapt. It's not because you feel like somebody else and the sirens. The adapting is based on data, and it's based on real environment situations. So we had COVID, right? We had that thing that happened. We knew that circumstances and situations are changing. That is a requirement to adapt. So don't be afraid to be able to adapt based on that. For me, when I was almost drowning, I had to adapt very quickly because I was going to die. So I pulled myself up, but I yelled out. I said, I need help from the community. I need help from my kids. They helped me pull up, and all these things that happened. They got the rope unwrapped around my legs. And so I was able to pull myself out because I was able to assess, plan, implement, and then adapt based on the changing environments. So identify, that's the whole part of it. And that's the whole part of this whole conversation is identify what's wrong, identify what's challenging, plan it, act on it, and then adapt with the environment and what's going on. And again, don't ever be afraid to adapt based on data or real life environment, because I'm not saying you ignore what is really going on. It's not a complete put your head in the sand. You have to know what's going on that part of it. Now, so let me transition into this. 100%, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I have a leadership wheel that I walk through, because there's 5 components to becoming a stronger leader and learning how to be able to pass these things on. Number 1 is you need to learn how to identify yourself as a leader. So whether that includes your personality assessments, your leadership styles, understanding what your faults are, what your strengths are, the drivers, the drainers, there's a whole ton of things in there that we could dive into. But number 1, you have to identify who you are as a leader. Number 2 is then now you have followers. Now, followers are where you hold influence. Influence comes because of the way that you act, the way that you're presenting, and there's all kinds of powers of leadership. That's a whole conversation in and of itself. But just understand that the influence is your followers. So if you turn around, you're going to have people following you. That could be in your business. If you're married, it could be your wife, it could be your kids, your husband, whatever. You are always going to have influence, and everybody is a leader. And there's a whole thing out there about, are you born a leader or are you made a leader? Everybody's a leader in some way. Flat out, it's going to happen. All right. So you've got yourself, you got to identify who you are. Number 2 is your followers. And then number 3 is now you have to be able to teach people how to manage. How do they manage time? How do they manage product? How do they manage the schedule? How do they manage things? Because you don't manage people, you just manage things. And unfortunately, in the World War times, we had to manage people. And so therefore it became very bossy. I don't know what else to call it, but it became very, very bossy. And so if you're going to try to manage people and tell them how to overcome fear, it's not going to work, because you don't manage people. You don't just tell them do this. It just doesn't work. You don't build that relationship. So that's the 3rd step. The 4th step is now becoming a leader of leaders. And that is when you start phasing into this, teaching other leaders to be able to teach the followers. And the last one is mentorship. So all of this stuff comes together. Let me put it in a way that is understandable, because that's the high level thing. As a leader, your actions have to meet your words. If you don't have consistency in action and deed, nobody is ever going to listen to you. So the way that you can instill other people, and let me just call it this way, you can instill a culture of action is by you acting, by you showing up, by you persevering, by you sticking to those purposes. You can tell somebody all day long until you're blue in the face of what they should be doing based on your company core values, which nobody's going to remember unless you're acting on them. So you have to be consistent in your word and deed, which is very rare in today's world. So just that one thing alone will set you apart as a leader, and it will start to teach those that are following you the way forward and how to be able to handle that. Right. Number two is when you're looking at this whole situation, you have to be willing to trust other people. You have to, and what I mean by trusting on that aspect is you have to be willing to delegate that to them. You cannot micromanage, because if you start to micromanage, what happens is it now becomes more of that bossy manipulator kind of a thing. But if you are able to trust and allow them to fail and then give them the chance to build confidence through their successes, now you've got somebody and you've been able to walk with them. So you allow them to fail, you allow them to learn from that failure, but then you circle back around and you teach from that failure. And what I mean by teaching is that's, again, coming back to that coaching aspect. And this is where leaders have to understand how to be able to make people feel uncomfortable, to stretch them, to grow them, to become better, and gently nudging them forward. And that comes through the trust. So if you have a relationship of trust, it gives you the ability to speak into their life to change their life for the better. There's all kinds of other things, but I think those two things are probably the most important. And again, I could list out, when I talk about leadership, there's 16 qualities that should really be present in leadership, but let me just stop on two because there's a lot more.
Yeah. And for everyone that's listening or watching out there, I told you at the top, this is why I was excited to talk to Tim, because there's such a breadth of knowledge. In this particular instance, we're not going to be able to kind of go as deep as we'd love to in every single bit of topic. But if you are listening to this and you don't have a community that you bounce ideas off of, you don't have a mentor, you don't have a coach or anything like that, Tim is kind of a great example of what someone that knowledge, he can go deep on so many different issues. And he's right now, it's his high level is that it's just going to be small needle pulls. But if you get that relationship and someone that's been down that river before, been down that trail before, you'll be surprised of how often things that come up, major things, will no longer be things that were completely either unexpected, and you certainly won't be unprepared for, because it's all uncertainty. That things are going to happen. 2020 is literally like the headline and poster child for things are going to happen we didn't expect. But you look at, and I've said that, a lot of my talk lately on social proof and things of that is people that have instituted this sort of culture within them have been able to persevere no matter what 2020 has thrown at them. Yep. And those that have struggled the most were ones that had no basis, had no consistency, but then also had no outlet to adapt. So Tim, I know more people that listen to this podcast are going to dive down rabbit holes with you or get in touch with you, or at the very least, just, I always see articles. I know you have your own podcast, things like that. Again, where should we start directing people so they can start hearing the words of Tim Croll?
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and it kind of depends on the specific subject matter. So I'll just give you this. The podcast, I speak only about leadership. And I co-host with 3 other people. I'd love to have you subscribe to that. You can find it on my website, timcroll.com/podcast. The blogging, I'm actually all over the place. And I constantly am posting actually the number one area is I post on LinkedIn. So I'm on Business Insider. I've worked on Good Men Project. I've worked on several different projects getting things published. So that is all over the place just because publication is all over the place. So that's the other way. And then LinkedIn really is probably the best connection for business. And I am using that almost exclusively. I'm just frankly sick and tired of Facebook because Facebook is pulling Facebook. And once again, they do what they do. So I just I'm going to LinkedIn.
That is another rabbit hole we could fall down, Tim.
Yeah. I'm going to stay on LinkedIn. So that's where I'm at. So those are the 3 main things. And then if you're looking to schedule time, I do have Calendly links and I can schedule hours. It depends on on availability. But you'd have to reach out to me directly because I'm not going to just throw that link out there to anybody. But I can, there's certain costs that are associated with an hours of time. But like I said, I can definitely work with people on that level. But yeah, that's really where it's at. Can I add this one? I want to add this quote because I think this is probably one of the most powerful quotes on fear. Mm-hmm. And this is Paul Perino, and he made this quote in one of the books that he wrote. He said, "I believe everyone has the ability to overcome their fear with a bit of direction and a positive push." And so concluding that leadership part of it, if you're the positive push and you provide a little bit of direction, you can help your employees overcome their fear.
That's the Tim Croll. If there's one thing you're going to take away, obviously, from that course there, but that right there is the way you presented it and the way you kind of broke it down. That's why I'm so excited to hear the feedback from this episode of what people thought. So, Tim, thank you once again. I'm always upfront and honest and pull the curtain back a bit. I had another guest scheduled for our penultimate. It was our episode 24, 25 for our first season here. And we plan to have Tim come. I was looking at it a little bit in the future. I think we're going to probably have to do a part 2 at some point. So thank you for stepping up and taking action for me here and hopping in the chair. And I look forward to talking with you once again, Tim.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And for all of you out there, thank you so much. I know you're going to go subscribe to Tim's podcast, but it's a little greasy if you haven't subscribed to ours just yet. So maybe do this one, then head over there, subscribe to Tim's. Also, you can review the podcast, you can share the podcast, or at the very least, just take the information you've learned and start using it. I do not want to be white noise in your ear. I want to help you and I want to help your business. And the guests I bring on, they come here with the understanding that they are going to be helping people. And that's why they give all that they have. So we'll be back next Thursday, the end of season 1 of our Nice Job podcast here. But don't worry, season 2 comes very, very quickly. Just a short little break for me. But for all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in. I want you to stay safe, I want you to stay healthy. And don't forget to have a little fun out there as well. Take care, everybody.